Monroe. It's very small, not a lot of people, not a lot of things to do. Boysville, we would go there every weekend and hang out. Just, running around, doing stuff with friends. I was just being a kid.
Boysville. It was originally a detention facility for juvenile offenders, but for the past 10 years, it had been abandoned.
That day, we thought we were just gonna hang out, do what we usually do, but that took a turn.
All right, so we seen the body.
My little cousin walked in, and he was like, holy shit, I saw a body.
This is for...
At first, I thought it was fake, so we recorded it as like a funny joke.
Oh my God, my heart is beating, bro.
In the middle of the room, there's a shower curtain with a door on top of it, and it looks like it's covering something up.
I'm not looking either. Look. You want me to get close up for you? Hey, here, move.
Wait, am I moving? Hold up. Hold up.
Yes. Here, kick that door up.
Had the bat to remove the door and tarp off. You can see it, plain as day. A body. The scariest moment of my life.
This kid has never seen anything like this, and he will never be able to unsee it for the rest of his days. I spent my career closing murder cases, but I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name is Michael Peterson, and I'm a detective with the Michigan State Police. I wanted to join the Michigan State Police because every day is different. I am working on cases that are challenging and exciting and providing justice for victims. That night, got a call that a couple boys were exploring and they stumbled upon a dead body at the Boysville facilities. I was familiar with it from my years working as a trooper because sometimes we'd respond out there for trespassers.
Boysville is in the middle of nowhere. It was woods all around it. If you weren't familiar with it, you would drive by and not even notice that it was there.
Many questions revolve around these places. They all have a certain frightening aspect to them. If these walls could talk, what would they say?
Entering the building, it's like very spooky. It could be a haunted house attraction. Even with the gun, I felt like, oh man, this isn't a good spot for me to be.
When I walk in, the first thing I consider is preserving evidence properly. No electricity, there's no heat, broken glass on the ground, random pieces of trash.
When an investigation begins, you never know what's important. You have to note everything there. It could become important later.
As I walked into the gymnasium, I observed the decedent lying on her back. She'd been covered up with a shower curtain and bifold door. It was difficult to tell how long she'd been there.
At night, it was super cold, so it slows down the body, decomposing.
However, there were biological fluids coming out of the decedent's mouth, consistent with an overdose.
And then there was also dried up blood right behind her head. Did she overdose, fall, hit her head, died, and whoever was with kind of freaked out and then covered up her body?
Could that work? Yes. But any good detective, and these guys are good detectives, never jump to conclusions. So they have to maintain an open mind.
There was a pentagram on the floor, not too far from the body. Could have been from a witchcraft ceremony, but it was unclear whether that was related to the crime or not.
And then there was also a tea candle left close to the body. Oh, is there some type of like ritual that's going on? Like, was she here for something? It was odd.
As I got closer to the body, I observed she had a bronze-colored substance smeared all over her legs. It seems someone took the time to deface her and demean her.
What is that about? It seems very odd. Why do that?
We had just that gut feeling that there's something more here than just an overdose. But if it wasn't an overdose, then how did she die?
I was looking for the medical examiner to clear things up. But because of how cold it was inside, her body was frozen.
I'm from Colorado. Work can often get 30 below zero. I've seen many frozen bodies, and I always hated it. You cannot examine a frozen body until it unfreezes. That's not going to happen for some time.
She didn't have a purse, cell phone, or any identification.
All they have is a frozen female. However, Peterson does have one trick he can use. He can still get fingerprints from a deceased remains, even if they're frozen. Might involve breaking their fingers. They're not going to feel that, but you will if you're the one that has to do it.
Using a portable fingerprint scanner, she was identified as Kayla Sadowski. Kayla was 23 years old. She was not originally from Monroe.
Peterson becomes aware of where the mother is located. He responds to that location, and he makes a death notification. Very unpleasant part of the job. Peterson then asks her questions. Tell me about your daughter's life.
Kayla had a troubled background. She was estranged from her biological parents. She had been adopted by her adopted mother.
She has Chippewa Indian blood in her and is proud of her heritage.
We learned she was a mother. She had a young child, a 3-year-old.
She was no longer with her son's father.
When the police came and told me they found Kayla, the world froze around me. Like, I lost all hearing. I couldn't think straight. How do I tell a 3-year-old that his mom is no longer around?
It was a lot of upheaval and emotions that were just all over the board. You know, you keep thinking, how could this happen to her? There's so many questions that go through your mind.
When me and Kayla started dating, we had a lot of stuff in common, but she was a wild child. I was always on my toes around Kayla. I didn't know what I was gonna get. We was together for about 6 months before we found out she was pregnant. After our son was born, Kayla was freaking out because she didn't know if she could be a good mom. She couldn't handle it. And she gave up custody. She figured, you're more stable. He's better off with you than he is with me.
The only thing that Kayla had asked is that she be able to see Ryan and he would know that Kayla was his mother. And we'd always promised her, Ryan will know that you are his mother.
Even though Kayla had her issues of keeping her life organized, she was always a good mother. She always cared about the child, went to see the child regularly.
After a while, she got more mature. She wanted to eventually try and get the family back together.
But then all of a sudden, Kayla went missing.
My name is Jessica Dupnack. I am a crime reporter at the Fox station in Detroit. I started getting messages about her being missing maybe a week or so before the body was found. She was known to once in a while go off the radar, except on Facebook. She's always on Facebook. It was her family and friends. One way they kind of kept tabs on her. And you could see right around Valentine's Day, February 15th, that activity stopped. After Valentine's Day, she was a ghost.
February 15th, we believe that that was likely the day of her death. I suspected foul play. I suspected it was likely a homicide, but I didn't know it was still possible that it was a drug overdose. The autopsy would reveal what it really was.
There is no technique or method that is used to defrost someone. It has to be a natural process. Now that the body is sufficiently unfrozen, it's time for the autopsy to commence.
The medical examiner discovered that Kayla had been shot 3 times with .22 caliber rounds.
Overdose is out the window. Now it's gunfire.
One of the shots went into Kayla's back, another one into her face. Those were not fatal, according to the medical examiner. The third one was at the top of her head.
Obvious intent to kill. It's an execution. Execution murders are not committed by strangers. There's someone who has a motive. And who might that be? So Peterson is looking for someone who really wanted Kayla Sadowski dead for some reason. It's not someone who's a stranger, someone who has an association with this victim. So Peterson returns to talk to Mr. Mayo to determine what he has to say about who Kayla associates with now.
Kayla kind of fell back in her ways of being a wild child.
You can tell a lot by someone's social media. I remember the first video I watched of her. She was in a car with some friends. They were driving around town, laughing, goofing around. And I was like, man, she seems very just normal, like kind of a normal girl.
Who's ex-boyfriend? Mine.
Digging in a little bit further, she seemed a little lost.
Trying to get me arrested.
Kayla had some issues with her upbringing. She was looking for acceptance. Sometimes it wasn't in the best places. Kayla tended to go for the bad boys.
Detectives asked Daniel who this contentious ex-boyfriend might be.
I pretty much tried to stay out of Kayla's relationships. It was none of my business who she was dating, but I did mention Steve Bales.
I would say Steve fit into the category of Kayla's bad boy persona that she dated.
That's my baby.
The relationship between Stephen Bales and Kayla Sadowski was reported to be highly contentious.
It was a very toxic relationship, just looking from the outside in.
We'd learned from a previous police report that Stephen Bales was arrested at a gas station at one point, and a woman reported that she overheard him scream at Kayla that he was going to kill her. Kayla had filed for a restraining order because she felt threatened by Stephen Bales. All of this made Stephen Bales a person of interest.
Peterson finally has a focus in this investigation. Here's a guy who could be the guy.
During this time when really starting to look hard into Stephen Bales, he was nowhere to be found.
He's in the wind. But word travels like wildfire in a small community.
Tonight, Michigan State Police are trying to figure out who murdered a woman found in Old Boysville Juvenile Detention Center.
This was huge news in Monroe County. This was a big deal.
Kayla moved around a lot with friends, but it was an ex-boyfriend who had been causing problems.
And now everyone knows the police want to find Stephen Bales.
If you have any information, please contact detectives at the Monroe Post for the Michigan State Police.
At this point, we received a phone call from Stephen Bales' cousin that they had some information in regards to the homicide. She agreed to come to the Post for an interview.
Steve's cousin informed us that she'd been on a phone call with Steve Bales and a friend of his named Bryn Smith.
She tells Peterson, Stephen and Bryn had shocking news.
They told her that a woman by the name of Kaylin Ramsey had killed Kayla.
Well, my. Peterson asked the cousin, what can you tell me about Kaylin Ramsey? The cousin reports that Kaylin Ramsey is good friends with Bryn Smith and Stephen Bales, and they all live together in Stephen's house. Stephen says to his cousin that Kaylin Ramsey shot Kayla Sadowski 3 times and covered up the body.
That was significant because none of the information she gave me was public, so only someone who knew about her homicide would know that.
We're concerned about Stephen being a prime suspect. Now we have to add in another possibility, Kaylin Ramsey. And fortunately, they both live in the same place, so only one warrant is required.
I ended up typing a search warrant for the apartment complex. But when we execute the search warrant, no one's there. Steve's apartment was just very messy and disorganized. There was a mattress or a couch in the living room. You could just tell it was just filled with too many people.
We learned that there were several people living there. There were Steve, Bryn Smith, Kaylin Ramsey, Steve's wife, Narina Bales, and in addition to them, Sierra Bemis. An apartment that is normally packed full of people and no one's there, that just adds to our suspicion because there'd be no reason why they would leave unless they were trying to hide. With the search of Steve's apartment, we are hoping to find some sort of evidence tying Steve Bales and others to the crime.
They do not find a .22 caliber handgun. They do not find .22 caliber ammunition. But what they do find is very interesting.
We ended up finding some key candles that were very similar to the ones that were on scene.
It was a small piece to connect to the crime scene.
It is not something that would cause the issue of an arrest warrant, but it certainly is evidence that you're on the right track. After they conclude their warrant, they return to their office when they are contacted by a television reporter from Detroit.
I called the police and I was like, look, here's the deal. I have this thing. I felt like I was sitting on maybe something that could crack this case wide open.
And of course, Peterson and his cohorts are all ears. Tell me more, my dear. Michigan police are looking for Stephen Bales and Kaylin Ramsey when a TV reporter from Detroit stops into their office and says she's in possession of things that they need to know.
Because I do crime, people reach out to me on social media all the time. Stephen Bales had reached out to me. I recorded the conversation for my own sort of note-taking.
I want you to put this on the air so I can clear my name. I'm on my honeymoon. I am not on the run. I am not on the run.
Stephen reports, I just got married on Valentine's Day, and we decided to make a fun thing of our honeymoon, and we are touring around the country with a few of our friends, including Bryn Smith. Stephen says he had nothing to do with the homicide of Kayla Sadowski.
And pretty much immediately, he was like, I know who did this.
Okay, so you believe you know who the killer is?
Oh, trust me, we have proof.
And he goes, we have a video confessional of Kaylin Ramsey saying that she did it. Just like, you gotta see this tape. You gotta see this tape. It's all there. And I was like, well, let me see the video. So he sent me the videos on Facebook Messenger. It was a video of a phone which contained the alleged confession.
This isn't my first time going through this. That's why I'm trying to get you to listen to what I'm telling you to do. Kayla's not my first.
That's
Anything I got away with 16 others.
It's essentially Kaylin saying that she shot Kayla and that she has shot numerous people before in the past.
You killed 16 people?
When I watched the videos, I didn't know whether to believe Kaylin Ramsey or not.
Where did you put the gun?
In the river.
Just looking at it, it was just such an odd video. Like, we knew there was more to it.
How'd you get there and how'd you get her there?
In a white van.
They were asking her fairly leading questions, but she did not appear to be threatened in any way or under any duress to answer these questions.
Something's not right about this, so Peterson's suspicious. I would be too. Peterson is walking through all the parts of this, looking for a weakness. He starts watching the video again. He stops looking at Ramsey and watches the reflection of Stephen Bales in the screen on Bryn's phone.
Steve and Bryn were talking to Kaylin Ramsey on FaceTime, but they were recording the conversation with another phone.
How'd you get there and how'd you get her there?
In a white van.
And suddenly, Peterson realizes what's been staring at him the entire time.
In a white van.
You see Steve in the reflection of this phone pump his fist.
In a white van.
You can clearly see Stephen Bales, like, just kind of giving the two fist pumps, like, yeah, we got her to say it.
Now, why would you do that? Why would you cheer someone incriminating themselves? Unless, of course, you're responsible for this crime.
We suspected that Bryn and Steve were involved. He was trying in some way to frame Kaylin, but that didn't mean that she was not involved in some way. At this point, I wanted to talk to her.
So Peterson and his associates are focused on finding Kaylin Ramsey when they get a call from a nearby Ohio police department. These officers report they're on routine patrol and are flagged down by an individual who reports his identity as Bryn Smith.
He had reportedly run from Steve Bales' vehicle and reported that he's a suspect in a homicide. He told them that he wanted to clear things up.
That in itself is weird.
So I went down to talk to Bryn Smith and get his side of the story.
So now, here's the deal. We're going to be asking a lot of questions here.
That's our question.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Before you start questions, can I show you something myself?
He reaches in his pocket, pulls out his cell phone.
This is where your money is.
And plays the tape of Kaylin Ramsey confessing to the murder. It's a video that Peterson has already seen.
There's nothing edited out because I can tell you I was the one who was interviewing her.
That's fine.
So.
But what was the, why were you talking to her in the first place?
Because I was uncomfortable. Out of nowhere, she's always shaky, just constant pacing, won't sit down. She was not right.
He gave a strange story that he wanted to find out what was wrong with her. So after they left for their honeymoon, he recorded her to find out what was going on, and then she confessed to the homicide. At that point, we had no idea why someone would want to kill Kayla. I asked him...
I think Kayla. She killed Kayla because at church one night, apparently Kayla threatened her.
Bryn says, in his opinion, that Kaylin Ramsey and Kayla Sadowski had been arguing a lot in the recent past, and it kept escalating. And Kaylin Ramsey had reached her breaking point and decided to eliminate Kayla Sadowski. Okay, that's Bryn's explanation. Does that make sense? Maybe. Maybe not.
And just out of curiosity, if they just got married, why are they bringing Bryn Smith along? Usually honeymoon is kind of an intimate time for...
I thought the same thing. But I know what it is.
What's that?
He knew I wanted to leave, so he brought me with him so I couldn't leave.
Okay.
He said that Stephen Bales controls everything that's going on.
Does he control his wife like this too, or is he...
Everybody. Sierra, me. When Kayla did live with him, he controlled her like that.
Okay.
The man goes for your money and your bridge cards and everything.
Sounds like a bad dude.
Seemed like Stephen was taking advantage of people who had some type of government assistance, and he would basically take that from them and say, hey, you can stay with me, but I'm going to control all the money and everything that you get.
So I just never left. But today, he went to the gas station and I got my chance and I ran.
Okay. Was Steve Bales involved in her this at all?
I don't know. That's the thing, I don't know. He says he wasn't, but that's what he says.
So, and you're saying you were not responsible or involved in any way at all?
No, sir.
Bryn Smith adamantly denied that he was involved in any way.
All right, when this is all said and done, how do you think the results of this investigation are going to come out on you?
On me? Free.
Free? Okay.
My gut feeling was that Bryn was involved in her murder. But we let Bryn go because at that point we didn't have enough evidence to arrest him for homicide.
He's set aside for the moment. He's in the bullpen. He hasn't been called into the game yet.
There was no evidence to show who at that point was involved. We're getting partial truths from everyone. It was difficult to tell how believable they were.
This group of people that are involved in this affair has become kind of like a game of whack-a-mole. One pops up, and then another one pops up, and they all have something to say. Peterson has been shaking all the trees and bushes in Ohio and Michigan looking for Kaylin Ramsey when all of a sudden, he gets a phone call from a blocked number, and guess who it is? It is Kaylin Ramsey.
She called me when I was heading back to Michigan and stated she'd be willing to talk to me.
Where exactly have you been, honey? With all the accusations being thrown about, Kaylin Ramsey tells Peterson she wants to clear her name in the murder of Kayla Sadowski.
And so I set up an appointment with her and her attorney to speak.
Okay, I'm Mike Peterson, working Michigan State Police.
Kayla was initially very cooperative, very polite.
Do you know Kayla Sadowski?
She was such a sweetheart. Oh my God. She was just like me, outgoing, laid back, calm, give her shirt off her back to whoever needed it more than her.
She was telling us that they would watch each other's kids, you know, that she loved her like a sister.
Did you have any conflicts with her ever?
No, I've never had a conflict with her at all whatsoever.
So he asked her the standard question. When was the last time you saw Kayla Sadowski?
I had just talked to her about maybe the day before she had passed at the grocery store.
Okay. When was that?
Around Valentine's Day.
That was significant because we had not released the date of death to the public.
As far as the press is concerned, she died on the 2nd of March.
You said the day before she passed, around Valentine's Day.
Yes.
So how do you know that? Maybe you're clairvoyant, huh? What do you think, Kayla?
Okay. So there are people who are alleging that you are responsible for Kayla's death. And I'm going to ask you straight up, is that true?
No.
It's not true.
I'm a good girl that said nothing wrong.
Okay. Do you remember talking to Steve and Bruna on FaceTime about Kayla's death?
I do not.
No. Okay.
I used to picture people I was interrogating as covered in buttons. When they told me an obvious lie or an incriminating statement, it's time to select a button. Now let me push this one and see what this one does.
Would it surprise you if I told you they recorded you saying that you killed Kayla? Would that surprise you?
Are you serious?
Our pupils go to pinpoints. That button touches a nerve.
Want to show it? Yeah, just watch it.
This isn't my first time going through this. Since I got away, there were 16 others. 16 other people? Yeah.
I've never killed anybody.
Kayla's not the first.
That was all coerced.
She stated that they were just trying to set her up and she was forced to make those videos.
And you can see right there, I'm acting out of normal because they're forcing me to say all this.
The detectives look at her and say, Kaylin, could you explain to me, please, how they forced you? Because I can't imagine that being the case. I don't think any other person over the age of 10 could imagine that either.
That's all a lie right there.
Okay,
They made me say all that.
At that point, I went from being cordial to being confrontational.
You're caught. You're involved, Kayla. It's a matter of how deep do you want to be involved.
When I pressed her more and more on her involvement, she eventually stated that Steve told her that he killed her.
He said I killed Kayla because she owed me money. I don't know the exact amount. I don't know what for.
She says she wouldn't pay him, so he killed her out of revenge, and now he's trying to say that I did it. No, Kaylin, you're missing the point here. You said you did it. On that amazing piece of video.
You're giving me half-truths there. You're already trying to put everything on you, and it wasn't all on you. We know that. I do not think you're the mastermind. Kaylin, help me help you.
I think I'm done for today.
At that point, she didn't want to talk to me anymore, but we didn't have enough evidence to tie her to the homicide. So we couldn't arrest her.
Kaylin, I'm telling you, this is going to end badly. And you know that.
All behavior you willfully engage in has consequences. Some are good, some are bad. But we, the homicide detectives of the world, are the consequences. And we're going to crush you. Mr. Bales is nowhere to be found. He's still at large somewhere. So Peterson is trying to remember who has he not spoken with, and he remembers another roommate, Sierra Bemis.
Could have a seat right there for me.
So we tracked Sierra Bemis down, and she agrees to come and talk to us.
So here's the deal. We know everything that happened, okay? You tell me everything you know about Kayla Sadowski's death.
Very quickly, she admits and kind of fills us in on like the details that we were missing.
Were you there when they were plotting her death? Okay, and what were they saying?
They were saying, oh, Kayla, you could take the gun and shoot her while I talk to her.
And who said that?
Steve.
She tells us how, Steve is kind of the mastermind of what was going to happen.
Why did you go with them to Boysville?
Because Steve was some good girl. Because he was, like, controlling.
Sierra reports it was his idea. He recruited all the roommates to participate in this offense.
What specifically did Steve tell you to do?
Just watch his back.
Were you acting as a lookout of sorts, too, in case people were coming?
Yes.
Sierra says, I had nothing to do with the murder. I was just there as a lookout. So you consider that to be nothing to do with it. She doesn't understand how the law works. You're part of a criminal conspiracy, and you're playing your part. The next time she sees them, they're going to have an arrest warrant with her name on it.
This was a huge piece of the puzzle that she gave us, but there was still a lot more work to do and more evidence to collect. We got a search warrant for everyone involved in this case, all their Facebook records.
Facebook is used a lot as an investigative tool. It is common for people, who are engaged in illegal activity to use Facebook Messenger, just thinking that it's not going to be captured anywhere.
Through Facebook Messenger, we had evidence that Bryn had pretended to be interested in dating Kayla.
Bryn's telling her that he loves her and that he wants to hang out with her. He's then communicating with Stephen Bales on Facebook, basically telling him, I've got Kayla, she fell right into my trap.
She's fallen into my trap. Oh, my. This is a murder plan conceived by the Three Stooges.
And then Bryn Smith planned a date with Kayla on the February 15th to explore Boysville, an abandoned building.
Bryn can see him communicating with Stephen Bales, basically telling him, hey, I arrived at Boysville.
The message saying, I can't find the gym, that was a huge piece of evidence. We knew the homicide took place in a gymnasium, and it was right around the time that we suspected she was killed.
That alone confirms everything about the conspiracy and the fact that Stephen's being reported to as the boss.
After we received the Facebook messages, we had enough evidence to obtain warrants for homicide for Steve Bales, Bryn Smith, Kaylin Ramsey, and Sierra Bemis.
However, they know where they are, with one exception. Mr. Bales is on a supposed never-ending honeymoon. Where is Stephen Bales? The Michigan State Police obtain arrest warrants for the group that is involved in the killing of Kayla Sadowski. Kaylin Ramsey, Bryn Smith, and Sierra Bemis are all taken into custody. But Stephen Bales, a mastermind of the plot, remains in hiding at an unknown location.
He was still out of state with Narina, and we turned to the U.S. Marshal for assistance.
Any marshal will tell you there's three places people go: their money, their main squeeze, or their mama, or someone in the family who's related by blood. And that's where they find them every single time. They tracked down Stephen Bales to a relative's home in North Carolina.
Steve and his wife Narina barricaded themselves into a bedroom and refused to come out.
There was an 8-hour standoff with him. Eventually, they deployed tear gas inside. He and Narina came out, and Steve was finally arrested. Following the arrest, Detective Sergeant Jordan Long and I went to North Carolina to speak with Steve.
It's a nice moment to finally be face-to-face with someone who you've been looking for and chasing around for a very long time. The difference being now you have him by the nostrils.
So do you want to talk to us?
I'll answer some questions, whatever you guys got, the best as I know.
If you're planning on lying, even a little one, let's end it now. I would rather you just walk out now.
I want to say I did not kill that girl.
Okay.
Me and my wife were on a honeymoon.
He was just very calm. I think he thought that he was going to get away with something.
Peterson starts to probe him.
When was the last time you saw Kayla?
Kayla, last time I saw her was when alive. I was at church on Sunday at House Restoration.
He said, the last time I saw Kayla alive, it was interesting that he specified alive in that statement. Have you ever been to the old Boysville facility?
One time.
When was that?
I had it done 20 years ago.
20 years ago? Okay.
You lying son of a bitch. When you're digging yourself a hole, the first thing you should do is stop digging.
Would it surprise you to know that we have a
Facebook conversation between you and Bryn at Boysville that night?
No, you don't.
I can guarantee we do.
Well, this is where I need my lawyer then.
All of a sudden, the 15-watt bulb comes on in Stephen's brain. You have enough evidence to put him under a prison, and he knows it.
Steve was charged with homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide and was extradited from North Carolina back to Michigan.
Since Stephen isn't going to talk, maybe his new bride, Narina Bales, could be more forthcoming.
Narina stated that Steve orchestrated the entire homicide and then told everyone what to do.
She throws him underneath the bus. She admitted that she was sitting at the apartment listening to the police scanner, and she was supposed to call Steve if, the police were being sent out to Boysville.
Which made her an active participant in the homicide. And so Narina was charged also with homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide.
A complicated murder case with somebody telling a little bit of the truth, somebody else telling a little bit more. It's maddening. But Peterson is able to assemble all that using the Facebook messages. And now they have a fairly good idea of what happened.
That's my baby.
Stephen Bales was involved in a love-hate relationship with Kayla. He loved her and then he hated her with a passion, and wanted her to be dead.
From our investigation, it showed that Steve likely wanted Kayla dead because she got a restraining order on him, and Steve became very angry and eventually started to manipulate people to help him kill her. On the evening of February 15th, 2023, Bryn picked Kayla up and drove Kayla to the abandoned Boysville facility. No one knows why or how he convinced her to go.
Just thinking about her walking up and being lured there, I just broke my heart.
Sierra was the lookout on scene. Narina was monitoring police radio communications. Stephen and Kaylin Ramsey were waiting inside. And they lured and directed Bryn as to what room they were in. Once inside, they ambushed Kayla immediately.
Kayla Ramsey shot her in the back.
And then she shot her in the face. That bullet did not kill her.
Kayla was just yelling, saying, "Steve, help me, help me."
Stephen was elated when she writhed in pain. Then Kaylin put the gun to her head, and that headshot was the fatal bullet.
The reason we believe Kaylin Ramsey was the shooter was that she confessed to shooting in her videos, and the reports of everyone else involved in this case all pointed it to her. They covered her with a fragrant sun-tanning oil to mask the smell of her decaying body, which explained what we saw the night of the crime when her face and legs were covered with bronze lotion. That absolutely would not have done anything to mask the smell of her body.
Now, you're not dealing with a criminal genius here. The planners of this crime couldn't plan a trip to the men's room, let alone a homicide. They then covered the body with a shower curtain and laid an interior door on her. And then finally, another friend, Alexander Fico, was recruited to dispose of the murder weapon. There are 6 people charged in this murder with various crimes. Apparently, it takes a village to murder someone in Monroe County, Michigan.
Bryn Smith and Kaylin Ramsey pled no contest to secondary homicide. Narina and Sierra took a plea agreement to secondary homicide, and Alexander Fico accepted a plea agreement in exchange for his testimony.
And since there were so many players involved in this willing to testify against the mastermind, Stephen Bales, they never offered him a plea deal.
Steve Bales went to trial. He was found guilty of homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide, and he received a sentence of life in prison.
He deserves life, but they should all be in prison for life. just like him. I can't fathom what any of them were thinking. I still have a hard time with it.
After the trial in Boysville, they demolished the building.
Kayla's memorial was set up not long after she was found. All right, place the flowers where you want. It's something so where if my son wants to see or talk to his mom, he could go and be there and talk to her. Say hi, Mommy. Hi, Mommy. Miss you.
There will never be closure for her family because there'll always be a hole where she once was. It's incredibly tragic. I was privileged to be able to bring Steve and the rest of them to justice.
That's why homicide detectives stand in the victim's shoes, because they can't anymore. It's your job to find out who did that and to punish them for it. You're not just the police, you're the murder police. On the next American Detective.
He was trying to lure a victim into meeting up with him.
I didn't do it. I'm not finna confess to it.
I was able to actually see who he last communicated with.
Sheriff's office, come to the door.
And now they're going to hammer him into the ground like a tent peg.
Human beings are strange creatures. They kill each other for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. And I mean anything from a handful of dollars to absolute, pure nonsense. This one sits right at the top of that tragic list. A cold-blooded murder off a rural North Carolina highway sends shockwaves through a quiet community where people used to leave their doors unlocked, their cars unlocked in driveways, thinking nothing could ever touch them. The victim was Fred Brown, a 45-year-old college professor and a military veteran who had bravely served his country in the tumultuous Vietnam War. He went through officer training school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he met the stepdaughter of his commanding officer, 21-year-old Patricia DeRosa. They married in 1969. She saw him as her white knight, the man who would rescue her from a childhood of poverty and struggle. For 20 years, she was a devoted Army wife, moving with him to different countries and different states, raising a son named Derek and a daughter named Sabra. In 1988, Fred retired from the military, and they settled into an upscale neighborhood in High Point, North Carolina. He taught economics at the local community college, and she became a real estate agent. To anyone looking from the outside, it was the picture-perfect American dream. But human nature is a deceptive thing, I tell you. In 1990, Pat Brown underwent open-heart surgery, a massive physical toll compounded by years of heavy smoking and high blood pressure. To recuperate, she traveled down Alabama to spend 2 or 3 months with her mother, Edna, and her younger sister, Sheila. Physical healing is one thing, but what happens to mind under that kind of stress is another story entirely. When Pat returned home to North Carolina, her mental health went down a dark, winding road, and she found solace in a very unconventional hobby. She started filling her home with exotic birds. 5 birds, 10 birds, and 20, until she had 50 or 60 exotic birds screaming and taking up entire walls and cages. Fred was deeply annoyed by the birds, but because he was a genuinely good, reliable man who wanted to provide for his recovering wife, he put up with it. He even hired housekeepers and began expensive home renovations, building a specialized room for her birds, planting a hot tub, and adding a privacy fence. But beneath that roof, a toxic resentment was festering inside Patricia Brown. She wanted a lavish lifestyle, a reality free from financial constraints, and she began to view her steady, sensible husband not as her white knight, but as a barrier to her desires. The home renovations and the massive expenses from her bird business were putting them into deep debt, creating a volatile domestic environment where she would constantly yell, scream, and curse at him. Fred, being the gentle soul he was, never argued back. But the internal torment of the perpetrator is a heavy thing to carry, and it often leaks out. Pat began to internalize a deep, greedy desperation, convincing herself that Fred was a tightwad who was suffocating her dreams. Her mind twisted her husband into an enemy. Fred felt this shift, and the psychological weight on the victim was devastating. He actually walked into the office of his close friend and fellow teacher. Kenneth Vaughn looked him dead in the eye and said point blank that he would not be surprised if Pat took out a contract on his life. He told his friend that his family would be better off with him dead. Think about that for a second. The absolute dread of knowing the person sharing your bed might want you gone. Kenneth urged him to leave, to walk away. But Fred refused because his deep religious faith did not allow for divorce. He chose to stay, unknowingly sealing his own fate. On April 25th, 1990_1, just after 8 o'clock on a spring morning, Major Tom Shepard of the Guilford County Sheriff's Department received a call. Maintenance workers had discovered a body face down in a grassy ditch just behind a station wagon along Highway 68. The victim had been shot once in the back and twice in the head. His wallet was completely missing. Now, on the surface, a missing wallet makes a rookie investigator think of a random robbery gone wrong. But seasoned detectives looked closer. There was a distinct footprint right on the back of Fred's shirt. You have to be kidding me. A random robber does not stand directly over a victim, place their foot firmly on his back, and execute him at point-blank range. Robbers are nervous. They shoot from a distance and run. This was personal. This was calculated, cold, and entirely premeditated, while detectives were processing the scene. Patricia Brown filed a missing persons report at 10 o'clock that morning, claiming Fred had gone to the grocery store the previous night around 10 o'clock and never returned. When detectives went to the home to break the news, Pat exhibited a complete lack of emotional concern, presenting a cold, flat reaction that immediately raised a massive red flag. She claimed they had a wonderful marriage with zero financial difficulties, a statement that investigators quickly discovered was an absolute lie after speaking with neighbors, co-workers, and their former housekeeper who had quit because of Pat's horrific verbal abuse toward Fred. Mother and daughter had solid alibis for the night of the murder, as Pat was teaching a real estate class 30 minutes south, and their son Derek was away at school. With no immediate physical evidence connecting Pat to the trigger, the case slowly went cold for about 3 years. Pat collected her husband's life insurance, his final state salary, sold family land, and moved back to Alabama with a couple $100,000 in her pocket. She bought 3 mobile homes and opened a business called Sassy's Pets, selling kittens and exotic birds, living out her twisted dream on the blood of her husband. But justice has a funny way of catching up with people. I tell you, on July 13th, 1994, the Reading Police Department in Pennsylvania called North Carolina investigators. A woman had discovered 2 envelopes left behind by her deceased father, Leroy Wetzel, with strict instructions on the outside stating they were to be opened only when he died. Inside was a dark, handwritten confession detailing the entire murder of Fred Brown. Investigators flew up to Pennsylvania and found Leroy in custody on unrelated child support warrants. Leroy was a short, angry man, standing 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighing 145 pounds, covered in tattoos, and known by the nickname Short Circuit due to his explosive temper. He also happened to be the ex-husband of Sheila Wetzel, the younger sister of Patricia Brown. Leroy laid out the entire plot. In 1990, while Pat was in Alabama recovering from surgery, she had asked her sister Sheila if she knew anyone who could eliminate Fred so she could cash in on what she believed was a $250,000 life insurance policy. Pat offered Leroy $30,000 to do the job. For an entire year, they planned it. On April 24th, 1990_1, Pat called Leroy and told him the timing was perfect because she would be away teaching a class. Leroy drove up from Alabama, parked his car on the side of the road, and intentionally removed his ignition coil to stage a breakdown. At 9:30 in the evening, he called Fred from a payphone, pretending to need help. Fred, being the helpful, decent man he was, drove out to assist him. As they stood looking under the hood, Leroy went to his back seat, pulled out a .22 caliber handgun, and told Fred that his wife wanted him dead. Fred begged for his life and tried to run, but Leroy shot him in the back, stood over him, placed his foot on his torso, and fired 2 final rounds into his head. Leroy fixed his car, drove away, and later realized he forgot to make it look like a robbery. So he walked back to steal the wallet, throwing it away on his drive back to Alabama. He called Pat in the middle of the night to confirm the deed was done, a call verified by telephone records. But here is the kicker, the ultimate proof of criminal stupidity. Patricia Brown never paid him the $30,000. She kept claiming she did not have the money. And Leroy's simmering rage over being cheated by his own sister-in-law is exactly why he wrote that confession letter. He hated Pat, and he hated his ex-wife Sheila. On July 21st, 1994, arrest warrants were executed for both sisters, while Pat maintained a cold silence. Sheila broke down completely and agreed to testify for the prosecution, admitting to the entire conspiracy. During the trial in May of 1995, the defense tried to argue that Leroy and Sheila acted alone, attempting to blackmail Fred by accusing him of having an affair with a family friend, and that the murder was an accidental escalation. But investigators had already thoroughly debunked the affair rumor. The prosecution urged the jury to see Patricia Brown for what she truly was, the greedy mastermind who traded her husband's life for exotic birds and financial freedom. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Patricia Brown guilty of first-degree murder, and the judge sentenced her to life in prison. In 2002, less than 7 years into her sentence, 53-year-old Patricia Brown died behind bars, her failing health finally catching up with her. Leroy Wetzel and Sheila Wetzel both pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and were each sentenced to 50 years in prison, taking the death penalty off the table for Leroy. This entire tragedy destroyed 2 families over absolutely nothing. Fred Brown was a good, honest, easygoing man who loved his family, his students, and his country. He deserved to live out his days, but instead, he was sacrificed on the altar of human greed. Patricia Brown thought she could fly free, but in the end, her own wicked choices completely clipped her wings. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most foolish reasons you can possibly imagine. I tell you, after decades of looking into the dark corners of the human soul, you think you've seen everything, but then a case comes along that makes you shake your head and realize that outward appearances can never truly disguise the monster within. When a person closes a door at night, nobody knows what goes on inside. In the late 1980s, Wilton Manors, Florida, had all the charm of a beach town without the hustle and bustle of visiting tourists. It was a small, quiet area where people moved to get away from Fort Lauderdale and the noise. It was a quiet place, a quiet bedroom community for the most part, and definitely a low-crime area. But on March 24, 1987, at 9:22 p.m., an urgent 911 call comes in from the family of 37-year-old Bernie James, reporting a dire situation outside the family home. It was reported to law enforcement that the victim's wife found him inside of his vehicle, with the front passenger seat fully reclined. He was slumped over to the side, completely unresponsive. The family removed him from the vehicle and began cardiopulmonary resuscitation on him on the front lawn. Emergency medical services responded, along with the Wilton Manors Police Department, but they determined that the victim was already deceased, assessing his injuries. It was clear 37-year-old Bernie James did not die of natural causes. The first officer observed that there was some blood on the right side of the ear, and blood inside the car part of the center console. There was clear blunt force trauma to the right side of the victim's head. But that was not all. The victim also had distinct ligature marks around his neck. That means that somebody was strangling him. This was done to him, and quite effectively, because he was entirely lifeless. When detectives arrived on the scene, they found 3 of Bernie's family members outside. His brother-in-law, Michael, his mother-in-law, Jane, and his wife, 36-year-old Patty James. The family appeared shocked. This was not someone you would expect to be murdered. Bernie James was known as a man that everybody loved. Born on July 1st, 1949 in Washington, D.C., Bernie was raised within a large family in the Maryland suburbs as the eldest of 9 children. He was a man who loved nature, camping, canoeing, and hiking. After high school, Bernie enlisted in the Marines and served 2 tours as a lance corporal in Vietnam. That war had a profound impact on him, shaping his deeply protective nature. In the 1970s, he returned to Maryland and joined the fire department as a firefighter and paramedic because he loved to help people. That was how he met his first wife, Lisa Jean Paul. They were both paramedics responding to a medical situation. They hit it off, and they were married within a year. They loved each other tremendously, a magnetic attraction. And they welcomed 3 kids in just over 3 years of marriage, Michael, Irene, and Nicholas. But this close-knit family was ripped apart just before Christmas 1980. Lisa suffered an aneurysm, collapsed, and life support was ceased after 12 hours. Bernie was completely distraught, left as a single man struggling to raise 3 toddlers who were all very close in age. As the years passed, the single father yearned to find love again, and in 1982, a chance encounter brought him just that. Bernie was working dispatch for the emergency fire line, and a woman named Patty called looking for a different person. They struck up a conversation. He told her about his struggles, and they built a friendship over phone. She would call every single day just to talk to him, to a lonely widower. A woman expressing such interest and showing affection toward his children was deeply appealing. Patty and her family were from Silver Spring, Maryland, where her father was a police detective and her mother was a banker. Despite her stable upbringing, Patty struggled severely with her self-confidence. She had a deep, very noticeable physical scar that literally dragged a portion of her face down, the result of a tumor surgically removed when she was very young. This deformity became the toxic focus of her entire life, instilling a deep-seated belief that she was hideous and that no one could ever truly love her. Inside her mind, a desperate need for control and validation began to warp into something malicious. She had been married twice before, once to a Fort Lauderdale police officer, but divorced in 1982. When she finally met Bernie in person, he did not see the scar on her face. He saw a beautiful person on the inside. She moved in, acting as a surrogate mother, lifting a great weight off his shoulders. They married in 1982. And she adopted all 3 children to legally become their new mother. She finally felt she belonged. About a year later, Patty convinced Bernie to move the entire family down to Florida to be near her own relatives, creating a rift between Bernie and his own parents. In Florida, Bernie landed his dream job as a state park ranger, caring for alligators and patrolling the outdoors. Everything seemed perfect on the outside, but 3 years later, all came crashing down. On that March night, Patty claimed she and Bernie had just returned from the grocery store. She went inside to put groceries away, while Bernie stayed outside to handle an electrical problem and perform an oil change on the vehicle. Patty claimed she went back outside to check on him and saw him talking to a black male, approximately 6 feet tall, in his 20s, speaking with a French accent, wearing a light-colored shirt and dark pants, who was asking for matches to light a cigar. She claimed Bernie told her to go back inside, and 20 minutes later, she returned to find Bernie unresponsive in a reclined passenger seat and the man gone. She called her mother, then her brother who lived down the street, before ever calling emergency services. Panic can make people do unusual things, but to an experienced investigator, lines are being drawn. The police knocked on doors and showed a composite sketch around a quiet neighborhood, but nobody had seen this mysterious individual. The next morning, the autopsy revealed the brutal truth. Bernie had been struck with blunt trauma over the right ear and strangled with an ascending ligature like a rope or wire, dying of asphyxiation. He had absolutely no defensive wounds, meaning he was completely surprised by his attacker. Furthermore, the medical examiner concluded this murder could not have occurred in the vehicle. There was simply no room in that car to swing an object with such force, and the lack of excessive blood on the passenger side proved the scene was staged. When detectives inspected the vehicle at a garage facility, they checked the oil dipstick and found it was completely full. The vehicle did not need an oil change. The scene had been intentionally set up with tools and oil cans to support a fabrication. Bernie's wallet was found a few feet away, rifled through but still containing his identification and credit cards. A real robber does not inventory a wallet on the driveway in plain sight. They grab it and run. The physical evidence was absolutely inconsistent with Patty's story. Somebody was lying. Detectives began digging into the household dynamic. They interviewed Bernie's parents, Dolores and Bernard Sr., who painted a troubling picture. After marrying Patty, Bernie had stopped contacting his family. Patty had demanded total isolation, telling him she was a woman of the house now, forcing him to cut off his own parents. The marriage lacked all affection. No kissing, no hugging, only screaming matches where she would force him to leave. In the fall of 1985, Bernie had secretly called his mother for the first time in years, stating he had had enough. He was leaving Patty, and he was getting a divorce. Patty, a woman driven by an intense psychological inability to handle rejection, faced the prospect of a third failed marriage and the loss of control. 6 months before the murder, Bernie's mother received a strange, typewritten letter supposedly from Bernie, claiming he was drinking and abusing Patty. It was completely out of character for the gentle park ranger, and the family suspected Patty had fabricated it to build a false paper trail of abuse. On April 8, 1980_7, investigators confronted Patty at the station. As they pushed her on the contradictions, her demeanor suddenly shifted from cooperative victim to calculating informant. She lowered her head, paused, and claimed she knew who killed her husband. She pointed a finger at a man named Tim Ott, whom she claimed they met at a bowling league. She claimed Tim had witnessed Bernie abusing her, and that on the night of the murder, they had gone to Tim's house to discuss a bowling schedule. She claimed she used Tim's bathroom, but Tim locked her inside, turned up the television volume, and committed the murder outside her presence, later forcing her to drive back while he moved Bernie's body in the victim's car. She claimed she staged a robbery out of sheer fear of Timothy Ott. You have to be kidding me. Investigators immediately brought Timothy Ott in for questioning. He was soft-spoken, highly intelligent, and completely confused when shown the names of Patty and Bernie James. But when shown a photograph of Patty, he recognized her instantly, not as Patty, but as a woman named Demi. He knew Bernie only by the name of Booth. Tim revealed a chilling reality. Patty James was a master of deception, leading an intricate double life. Tim had an online or over-the-phone fiancée named TJ, a flight attendant whom he had never met in person. TJ had told Tim that her former husband, Booth, was a horrific child molester and an abusive monster who needed to be stopped. On the night of March 24, 1987, Demi brought Booth to Tim's apartment to put an execution plot into motion to protect children from a monster. In reality, TJ did not exist. Patty had used her voice to manipulate Tim over the phone as the fictional TJ. When the time came that TJ would have to appear in person, Patty created a second persona, Demi, the trusted friend of TJ, who accompanied Bernie to his death. Patty had systematically brainwashed this young man, exploiting his desire to be a protector. Tim confessed that he grabbed a baseball bat and struck Bernie on the side of the head in his bedroom. And when the victim did not go down, he utilized a wire to strangle him until he had no breath left. They then loaded the lifeless body into the vehicle and drove it back to the Wilton Manors home. Tim revealed that he and Patty had discussed several ways to eliminate Bernie prior to that night, including grinding up apple seeds, apricot seeds, and Valium to bake into a cake, which had only succeeded in making Bernie ill. They had also considered shooting him, but could not find a sufficiently remote field. Detectives accompanied Tim to his apartment 15 days after the homicide, despite his attempts to clean the bedroom carpet. An application of luminol revealed a massive amount of blood, perfectly validating his confession. Tim was formally charged with first-degree murder. As investigators turned their full attention to Patty, the true extent of her sinister nature emerged. Patty was a manipulative con artist whose primary income came from filing frivolous lawsuits. She was a psychological predator who targeted the vulnerable, and her own adopted children were her primary victims because they were the easiest to manipulate. She had subjected those poor children to years of profound isolation and abuse, forcing them to stay indoors, hidden from neighbors who did not even know they existed. She had even forced her youngest son, Nicholas, to check out books on American Sign Language, pretending he was deaf in order to scam local churches out of charitable donations. Her motive for murder was a cold, layered combination of greed and malice. Investigators discovered that prior to Bernie's death, Patty had coerced him into taking out a substantial life insurance policy on himself, explicitly removing all 3 of his biological children as beneficiaries, leaving her as the sole recipient of the payout. She saw Bernie as an asset to be liquidated before he could leave her. On June 8, 1987, detectives arrested Patty James at the children's school right after she dropped them off. Once in custody, facing the absolute end of her games, she attempted one final manipulation. She dropped her head, remained quiet, and then suddenly popped up to claim she had absolutely no memory of the murder, suggesting that her alternate personality, TJ, must have committed the crime. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to escape accountability. Tim chose to take a plea deal for second-degree murder, agreeing to testify against her rather than face a jury. On November 30th, 1987, Patty's first trial began. The defense tried to argue she was an innocent victim of Tim Ott's independent actions, resulting in a mistrial due to a single rogue juror who refused to deliberate. However, in her second trial, the prosecution successfully demonstrated her absolute, calculating control over the entire conspiracy. Patty James was swiftly convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She was an individual stripped of conscience, compassion, and remorse, an entity of pure evil who destroyed a good man, a dedicated protector, for nothing more than a payout and a refusal to lose control. The 3 young children were left without a father, permanently scarred by the monster they called a mother. It is a stark, chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators do not hide in the bushes. They sit right across from you at the dinner table. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. They kill for money, for spite, for a fleeting sense of power, and sometimes just because they are bored with their own miserable existence. You sit in a room, you look a killer in the eye, and you realize that the most dangerous thing on this earth is not a wild animal or a natural disaster. It is a human being with a secret. You have to be kidding me. I have spent a lifetime looking at the darkness that hides behind the eyes of those who think they can outsmart the law. But even after all these years, the sheer coldness of this case in Stanton, Missouri, makes my blood run cold. It began on a night in October, 1992. A vehicle was found ablaze in a remote field, and inside that burning metal trap was a man who never saw it coming. Danny Coleman. He was a good man, a hard-working man, a father who cared about his son, and a husband who, in his own mind, was living a decent life. He had no idea he was sleeping next to a viper. When we arrived at that scene, the fire had done its work. The body was unrecognizable, a charred ruin of what was once a human being. But the truth, no matter how hard you try to burn away, always leaves a trail. We found a metal rod in his leg, a souvenir from a past accident, and that, my friends, was the key that unlocked the door to this nightmare. You look at Danny, and you see a man who was honest, simple, and kind. He taught children how to handle firearms. He worked at a soda machine company. He treated ceramic floors, and he loved his family. He was a man who played by the rules in a world that, unfortunately, was full of people who did not. Then you look at Karen. She was a different animal entirely. She was playing a double life, buried in a world of methamphetamine, cocaine, and extramarital affairs. She lived in the suburbs. She drove the car. She did the laundry, and all the while, she was plotting the demise of the very person who provided her with a comfortable life. It is absolutely sickening. She wasn't just cheating on him. She was commodifying his life for a $50,000 insurance policy. She placed a price tag on a human soul, and that price was a pittance. I tell you, the arrogance of these people knows no bounds. They thought they could commit a crime and walk away into the sunset. They thought a fire would consume the evidence, the fingerprints, and the sins. They forgot that justice has a very long memory. For years, this case sat in a file, a cold, silent reminder of a life stolen. But then, a deathbed confession from a man named Larry Nolan, a man who was also played like a fiddle by Karen, broke the floodgates. He thought he was in love with her. He thought he was going to get rich, and instead he died in prison, discarded just like Danny. When you dig into the lives of men like James Cornhart and Stephen Mueller, you find the hollow men of this world. They did not have a grudge against Danny. They did not know him. They didn't care about his life or his family. They did it for a few $1,000s. For a promise of cash that was never going to make them rich, only condemned. They were hitmen by convenience, butchers for hire. To think that they lured a man into a trap, claiming they had secrets about his own wife, is the ultimate betrayal. He went to find the truth, and he found a bullet instead. Stephen Mueller later admitted he was the one who pulled the trigger. They shot him, they burned him, and they left him in a field to rot like trash. It is a level of cowardice that I find difficult to process, even after all these years of walking through the darkest corners of this world. The investigation was a long, winding road of conspiracy. It was difficult because you are dealing with people who lie as easily as they breathe. But the evidence, when it finally surfaced, was indisputable. The fingerprint on the cellophane wrapper, the recorded phone calls from jail where they discussed disposing of a homemade silencer made from a lawnmower muffler. You cannot make this stuff up. It is the stupidity of the criminal mind that eventually brings them down. They think they are clever, they think they are invisible, and then they make one phone call too many, or they leave one print behind, and suddenly the walls come closing in. Karen Coleman, when she finally decided to speak, did so not out of remorse, but out of self-preservation. She wanted a deal. She wanted to save her own skin, even after orchestrating the murder of the man who raised her son. She sat there and blamed the drugs, as if a needle in the arm is an excuse for a hole in the heart. She was a murderer in spirit long before the fire was lit. She was the architect of this tragedy, and she should have spent the rest of her days behind bars. Instead, she got 20 years for her cooperation. Life in prison for the men who pulled the trigger is a start, but it hardly balances the scales for a life cut short in such a brutal, calculated fashion. Danny Coleman was a good man who got blindsided, and the world is a little bit emptier without him. You look at these cases and you wonder, what are we becoming? We are becoming a society where empathy is a weakness and greed is the only law. And that, I tell you, is a tragedy that no amount of jail time can ever truly fix. This is a door at night. Nobody truly knows what goes on inside. It is a tragedy, a deep, stinging tragedy, and I tell you, it stays with you long after the gavel falls. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. My. You think you know the people you wake up next to, but sometimes you are sleeping in the same bed as a nightmare. I tell you, in my time as a homicide detective, I have seen some truly dark things. But the case of Bernie James really makes you stop and wonder about the capacity for evil in the human heart. It was March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, a place where you would expect quiet, not murder. Bernie James was a good man. He was a veteran of the Marine Corps, a firefighter, a paramedic. He had been through the mill of life, losing his first wife and trying to raise 3 small children on his own. He wanted a partner. He wanted a mother for his kids. Instead, he found Patty. Patty was a master of the con. She walked into his life and wove a web of deception so thick that it Took us a long time to see the monster beneath the mask. You have to be kidding me. That was my first reaction when we arrived on that scene. A man found in his own car, struck on the head, strangled, with a story from his wife that was full of holes. She claimed he was outside, talking to some mysterious black man about a cigar, a phantom, a ghost. She said she went inside, and when she came back, he was dead. It does not take a rocket scientist to look at the blood splatter, the state of the vehicle, and the lack of any real evidence for her story to know that someone is lying. The oil change, the wallet tossed on the ground, the lack of defensive wounds on Bernie. It was all a stage play. As we dug into her background, we found out that Patty was a woman of many faces. She was not just a wife. She was Demi. She was a non-existent flight attendant named TJ. She had manipulated a man named Timot, convinced him that she was a victim, convinced him that killing her husband was some kind of righteous act. She turned a man into a hitman just by whispering the right lies. She alienated those children from their own family, turned their home into a prison of silence, and built a life on nothing but fraud and extortion. When we finally brought her in, she tried to play the shell game with her own personality, saying she did not remember, trying to blame this imaginary person she created. She was a narcissist of the highest order. She could not handle the fact that Bernie wanted to leave her, that he wanted a divorce. That would have been her third divorce, and her ego could not take the hit. So she decided to end his life instead. She took a life insurance policy out on him, made sure she was the only beneficiary, and thought she was smarter than the law. She was wrong. We caught her, and the justice system did its job. But the tragedy, I tell you, is that 3 children had to lose their father to the machinations of a woman who was empty inside. There is no soul in a person who does what she did. She was not human in the way that matters. She was pure, unadulterated evil, wrapped in a persona she built out of thin air. When you look at a case like this, you realize that the most dangerous weapon is not a gun or a rope. It is the tongue of a manipulator who has decided that your life is just a piece on their board. Game. And that, my friends, is the cold, hard truth. People are strange creatures, and I tell you, they kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. You think you know the person sleeping next to you, but when the sun goes down and that bedroom door closes, that is exactly when the real monster wakes up. And you have to be kidding me if you think you can ever truly understand the depths of a human heart, or the darkness that can fester within it. Let me tell you about Bernie James, a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a man who saved lives and walked through the fires of hell, literally, only to be taken out by a shadow in his own front yard. On March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, a call came into the station in the quiet, sleepy town of Wilton Manors, Florida, reporting a dire situation where a wife found her husband in his own vehicle, unresponsive, with a reclined seat and a life snuffed out by blunt force trauma and strangulation. You walk onto a scene like that, and your gut tells you immediately that something is wrong, because the physics of the crime just do not add up. The car was the supposed scene of the struggle, yet there was not enough blood to match the injury. There was oil and tools present, but the engine was full, and a wallet was rifled through right there on the driveway, which is a classic. Pathetic attempt to stage a robbery that nobody with any sense is ever going to believe because, A, thief does not stop to count his loot while he is running for his life. Somebody was lying, and that somebody was a widow, Patty, who spun a tale about a tall stranger in a light shirt with a French accent who just happened to be looking for a light for a cigar. A ghost story that evaporated the moment we knocked on doors in that quiet neighborhood and found absolutely nobody who had seen a soul. You see, Bernie was a man who wanted out of a marriage that had become a prison, a man who had been isolated from his own parents and his own children by a woman who was a professional at manipulation, a con artist who lived her life behind a mask of carefully constructed lies. We started digging, And what we found was enough to make your skin crawl, because Patty was not just one person. She was a performance, pretending to be a flight attendant named TJ or a friend named Demi, using these aliases to weave a web so complex that she successfully convinced a man she met at a bowling alley, Tim Ott, that her husband was a monster, a child molester, and an abuser who needed to be put down. Tim Ott, poor, foolish Tim Ott, listened to the siren song of a woman he barely knew, and he carried out the deed, striking Bernie with a bat in his own apartment and strangling him with wire before they dumped him in that car to stage the scene. And when we finally sat him down, he did not even know who Bernie was. He knew the masks, he knew Booth, and he knew Demi, but he did not know the truth. It is a pathetic thing to see. A man throwing his life away because he was a pawn in a game played by a woman with no conscience, no compassion, and absolutely no remorse. A woman who would even use her own children in scams to rob churches, pretending they were disabled just to fill her pockets with cash. When we finally brought her in, she tried to pull that split personality act, dropping her head, pausing for effect, and telling us she did not remember any of it, trying to blame this imaginary TJ. And you have to be kidding me if you think that kind of fairy tale is going to hold up under the cold, hard light of a courtroom. It did not take long for the law to catch up with her, and she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life, which is exactly where she belongs, because there is no room in society for a person who treats human lives like disposable assets in a grand, twisted scheme. And I tell you, the world is a little bit safer with her behind bars, where she can never hurt anyone ever again. Humans are curious creatures. You know, they kill for the most mundane, the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly conceive. You see it enough times and you realize that some people, they just are not wired like the rest of us. They carry a darkness inside that eventually spills out into the light of day. Take the case of Bernie James, a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a paramedic who spent his life saving others only to find himself the target of the most calculated, cold-blooded betrayal I have ever seen. It was the evening of March 24th, 1987, in the quiet, peaceful bedroom community of Wilton Manors, Florida, when a 911 call shattered the silence at 9:22 in the evening. The family of 37-year-old Bernie James was reporting a dire situation, and when the police arrived, they found him unresponsive inside his vehicle, which was a classic setup for a crime scene that just did not add up. The man had sustained blunt force trauma to the right side of his head and had clear ligature marks around his neck, meaning he was strangled, and the scene was staged with oil cans left out to suggest a repair that never happened, all while a wallet was left nearby, rifled through but not taken, which is just a lazy attempt to make a homicide look like a random robbery. You have to be kidding me. Did they really think we were that stupid? Bernie had been a widower, his first wife, Lisa, having passed away from an aneurysm in 1980, and he was raising 3 small children when he met Patty, a woman who seemed to fill the void, a woman who, despite a significant facial scar and deep insecurities, managed to weave herself into his life and adopt his children, only to slowly isolate him from his family, his friends, and even his own kids. I tell you, when you dig into the lives of these people, you find out that behind closed doors, things are rarely what they seem, and in the James household, there were screaming matches and constant turmoil, all while Patty was playing a game so twisted it defies belief. She did not just lie. She lived in a web of personas, pretending to be a flight attendant named TJ or a woman named Demi to manipulate a man named Tim Ott, whom she convinced that Bernie was an abusive monster who needed to be removed. It is the height of arrogance, really, to think you can manipulate a total stranger into committing a murder for you while you pull the strings from the shadows. And that is exactly what she did when investigators finally sat down with Tim Ott, who was a soft-spoken and intelligent man. He was confused. He had never heard of Bernie James, but he knew a Booth and a Demi, And he laid out the whole chilling plot, how they had discussed various ways to kill the man, from grinding up seeds to use as poison to eventually settling on the blunt force trauma and strangulation in his own apartment. The sheer coldness of it all, that they would sit there, two strangers, and plot the destruction of a human life, like it was a casual conversation about the weather. When the detectives went back to Tim Ott's apartment with chemical agents, they found the blood, the evidence that the deed was done exactly where he said it was. An entire story collapsed on Patty. I tell you, it is a sad state of affairs when a person like that walks among us. Someone with no conscience, no compassion, and no remorse. A person who would use her own children as pawns in her sick little games and then discard her. Husband like a piece of trash. She tried to play the victim, claiming she did not remember anything, claiming she had other personalities. But the jury saw through it, and she was eventually convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, where she belongs, far away from the lives she destroyed. It makes you realize that while we like to think the world is a safe place, there are monsters among us, and it takes a relentless pursuit of the truth, a refusal to accept the lies, and a cold look at the facts to put them where they can no longer do harm. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine, and they lie with the kind of confidence that makes you wonder if they truly believe their own. Fabrications. My. You have to be kidding me. You look at a case like this, a nice quiet neighborhood in Wilton Manors, Florida, back in 1987, and you think nothing bad happens here. But evil does not care about the charm of a beach town or the quiet of a bedroom community. It settles in right where people let their guard down. Bernie James was a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a man who spent his life protecting others. He served 2 tours in Vietnam and came home to help people as a paramedic. He had a heart that was perhaps too big for his own good. He lost his first wife, the mother of his 3 children, and he was left to navigate the wreckage of that life alone. Then he met Patty. She walked into his life, and he saw past the scars on her face, the physical deformities that she let define her existence, and he saw a person he thought he could love. He wanted a mother for his children. She wanted a target. People ask me what the most dangerous thing in the world is. It is not a weapon. It is a person who has absolutely no conscience. Patty James was a master of the con. She did not just lie. She built entire realities for people to live in. She created personas. She was Demi. She was TJ. She was whoever she needed to be to get what she wanted, and what she wanted was control. When Bernie finally realized what she was, when he decided he was going to walk away, that was his death sentence. You see, people like that, they cannot handle being discarded. It bruises the ego, and for them, that is a mortal wound. On March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, the call came in. Bernie was found in his car. His wife, Patty, claimed it was a robbery. A black man asking for matches. A total fabrication. When I hear a story like that, I do not look at the suspect. I look at the scene. The scene never lies. The car was a stage, poorly set. The wallet was on the ground, rifled through, but the identification was there. Who robbed someone and leaves the credit cards? And the oil change story? Ridiculous. The oil was full. The vehicle was not being serviced. There was blood missing. If he had been struck and strangled in that car, the interior would have been a crime scene. It was clean. You do not have to be a genius to know that the car was just a place to dump the body. We found the truth in the apartment of Tim Ott. A man Patty had wrapped around her finger. She had convinced him that Bernie was a child molester, a monster. She had played on his sympathies, just like she played on Bernie. The crime happened in the bedroom of that apartment, not on the driveway. We found the blood with luminol 15 days later, confirming the confession. My. She did not even lift the bat. She just pointed the way. She had Tim do the dirty work while she acted the victim. She had even taken out a life insurance policy on him, ensuring that even in death, he served her financial interests. It is chilling. When she was finally cornered, she pulled the ultimate stunt. She claimed she did not remember. She blamed it on another personality, a flight attendant named TJ. You have to be kidding me. It is the oldest trick in the book, trying to retreat into the shadows of the mind when the walls start closing in. But a law does not care about your imaginary friends. She was convicted of first-degree murder, and she got what she deserved. She treated those children like pawns, scamming churches by pretending one of them was deaf, isolating them, controlling them. She was a hollow shell of a person, masquerading as a mother, a wife, and a human being. The tragedy is not just that a good man died. It is that he died thinking he was protecting his family from a monster he invited into his home. Life is precious, but it is also fragile, and sometimes the person who breaks it is the one who claims to love it the most. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. Jealousy, money, or just because they think they're the smartest person in the room. I tell you, it is enough to make you lose faith in humanity. You have to be kidding me if you think you can hide the darkness behind a closed door forever. Take the case of Bernie James, a man of service, a Marine, a firefighter, a paramedic. He spent his life trying to save others, only to be taken out by someone who claimed to love him. My. On the 24th of March, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening, a call comes in. A quiet bedroom community in Wilton Manors, Florida. Not a place you expect to find a body. But death does not care about your zip code. We arrive and find Bernie James slumped in his vehicle. Blunt trauma to the right side of the head. Ligature marks around his neck. Someone squeezed the life out of him, and they did it with intent. His wife, Patty, stands there playing the role of the grieving widow. She tells us a story. She says she and Bernie were doing maintenance on the car. He was talking to a mysterious man, a stranger in the dark. It is a fairy tale, and a bad one at that. When you look at a crime scene, the physical evidence is the only thing that does not lie to you. The car was not where the murder happened. There was not enough blood in that vehicle for the injury he sustained. It was a setup, a pathetic, clumsy setup. Patty James claimed she was a victim, a woman with a scar, a woman who needed protection. But as we pulled the threads on this tapestry of lies, the image of a monster started to emerge. She was not just a wife. She was a master of deception. She invented an imaginary flight attendant named TJ. When the walls started closing in, she invented another persona, Demi, just alluring a man named Tim ought to do her dirty work. She and Tim ought discuss ways to kill her husband, poisoning him with crushed seeds, shooting him, and finally bludgeoning him in an apartment before dumping his body back at his own home. It is cold, calculated, and frankly, it is disgusting. She had him take out life insurance policies, making sure she was the only one who would benefit. She did not love him. She used him. She isolated him. She tried to ruin the lives of his children. You look at a person like that, and you wonder, how can someone be so empty? She was not a human being in my eyes. She was a predator. When the truth came out, when we found the blood evidence in the apartment, her house of cards collapsed. She went to trial, and she was convicted. She got exactly what she deserved. If the word evil can be applied to a person, it certainly applies to her. A woman with no conscience, no remorse, and a life built on scams and blood. She destroyed a good man, a man who just wanted a family, a man who saw the beauty in her despite the scars she had behind. It is a tragedy, I tell you, a pure, unadulterated tragedy. The world is a little dimmer without a man like Bernie James in it, and a lot more dangerous with people like Patty James walking among us. You think you know the person sleeping next to you, but when the lights go out, sometimes you are looking at a stranger with a knife in their hand. It is enough to keep you up at night, and that is exactly why I do what I do. Humans are curious creatures. They build lives, they raise families, and then they destroy it all over nothing. My. You think you know the person sleeping next to you. You wake up in the morning, you pour a cup of coffee, you go to work. But sometimes when you close that door at night, you are sleeping next to a monster. And you have no idea. Bernie James was a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a man who spent his life protecting others. He lost his first wife and was left with 3 children under the age of 3. He was vulnerable. He was lonely, and along came Patty. She had a scar on her face, a physical mark of her own history, and she used that to make Bernie feel like he was her savior. But the savior was the one who needed saving. I tell you, it is a tragedy. March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, a quiet place. People moved there to get away from the noise, but the noise found them that night. 9:22 post-meridium, a 911 call. Bernie is found in his car. A stage scene. The wallet tossed aside, the car seat reclined, and the claim of a stranger. A man who simply did not exist. You have to be kidding me. They think we are stupid. They think we just look at the scene and see what they want us to see. But we look closer. We always look closer. The oil was full. The wallet was on the ground, but not empty. A man who allegedly stopped for matches at 9:22 at night? No, it was a lie. A web of lies. Patty played the part of the grieving widow, but it was just theater. She told us she saw a black man, 6 feet tall, speaking with an accent. We scoured the neighborhood. We knocked on every door. Nobody saw a thing. Why? Because he was never there. And then we find the accomplice. Timot, a man who had never even met the victim, but was being manipulated by this woman. She was not just Patty. She was Demi. She was TJ, a flight attendant, a fake friend. She had more personalities than a television channel. She was a master at deception. She isolated those children. She's scamming churches with fake stories about her son being deaf. She was a predator in the skin of a housewife. Tim Ott was her puppet. They discussed multiple ways to end Bernie. Poison, shooting, and finally, the most cold-blooded method imaginable. They did it in the bedroom. Then they moved the body. They thought they were clever. They thought they could outsmart the law. But the truth has a funny way of rising to the surface, like a cork in water. When we confronted Patty with the truth, she did not crack like a normal person. She just switched masks. She told us she did not remember. She blamed TJ. She blamed the voices. She blamed everything except the woman in the mirror. She could not handle the rejection of a divorce. She could not handle losing her meal ticket. She had him take out a life insurance policy, naming only herself and removing his own children from the benefits. If the word evil could be applied to a person, it would fit her like a glove. She had no conscience. She had no remorse. She viewed people as assets to be used and discarded. Bernie James died because he was a good man who made a bad choice in partner. He was a father of 3, only 6, 7, and 8 years old at the time. Those children lost their mother, and then they lost their father to the person they were told to call mom. It is a sickening thought. We arrested her at the school right after she dropped off the kids. She saw the police, and the mask finally began to slip. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. Justice was served. But justice cannot bring back a man who gave so much to a world that took everything from him. I tell you, the human heart is a dark forest. You never know what is hiding behind the trees until you shine a light on it. And sometimes what you find is just plain evil. Human beings are strange creatures, and I tell you, they kill over the silliest things you can imagine. Sometimes the monster you fear is not lurking in the shadows, but wearing a smile right across from you at the dinner table. I have seen some things in my time, but the case of Bernie James makes you lose your faith in humanity. You have to be kidding me, but some people are just born without a conscience. Bernie James was a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a guy who served his country and protected his community, a man who simply wanted to fill the void of a lost wife by opening his heart to a woman who seemed to need him. On March 24th, 1987, in the quiet community of Wilton Manors, Florida, a place where people went to escape the noise. His life was cut short by someone who claimed to love him. You see, when a person closes their door at night, you never know what kind of demon is waiting on the other side. The scene the police found, 922 Post Meridian, was supposedly a robbery gone wrong. But the lies, they were as thick as fog. They told us he was out there fixing his car, but the evidence told a different story. The dipstick showed the oil was full. The wallet was rifled through, but the valuables were still there. It did not fit. It was a setup, plain and simple. And then we have the wife, Patty. She played the part of the grieving spouse, the woman who needed a savior. But beneath that exterior was a master deception. She created a world of make-believe to cover her tracks, pretending to be flight attendants or friends to manipulate a man named Tim out into doing her dirty work. She had him convinced that Bernie was a monster, a child molester, a man who deserved to die. And he fell for it. They planned it out. They talked about poisons. They talked about guns. And eventually, they settled on the brutality of a baseball bat and a wire. Can you imagine the coldness required to orchestrate such a thing? She wanted out of the marriage. She wanted the life insurance money. And she wanted to keep playing the victim. When we finally broke through the facade, when we saw through the layers of her lies, the fake personas of Demi and TJ, the truth came out, and it was ugly. It was pure, unadulterated evil. Bernie James did not deserve his end. He was a man who tried to be a father to 3 children under 3 years old, only to be betrayed by the very person who promised to stand by his side. Justice was served on June 8, 1987, for the arrest and later the conviction in November 30th, 1987. But it does not bring the man back, and that, my friend, is the tragedy of it all. My, you think you know people, and then you see something like this. You have to be kidding me. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine, and they do it with a smile on their face, right until the cuffs click shut. I tell you, it never ceases to amaze me. Bernie James was a man of integrity, a veteran, a man who built a life from the ashes of his own heartbreak. But he fell victim to a predator disguised as a savior. It was March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, when this good man lost his life. When I look at a crime scene, I look for the truth, not the story someone tells me. Patty James told us a story about a stranger, a mysterious man who appeared out of nowhere to ask for a light for a cigar. She thought she was clever. She thought she could lead us by the nose. But a seasoned investigator knows that when the story changes, or when the physical evidence does not match the narrative, the truth is lurking right beneath the surface. Bernie had been struck and strangled, yet there was no blood inside the vehicle where she claimed it happened, and the oil dipstick was full when she claimed he was changing the oil. Lies are like a house of cards. You pull one, and the whole thing comes tumbling down. We dug deeper, and what we found was a pit of vipers. She was not just a wife. She was a master of puppets, creating fake identities, playing on the sympathies of a man like Timot, who became her pawn in this sick game. She invented a woman named Demi. She invented a flight attendant named TJ. And she manipulated everyone around her to get what she wanted, which was the life insurance money and the freedom from a man she could not control. She was a black widow in every sense of the word. I look back at this and I think about those children, those 3 little ones who lost their mother to an aneurysm, and then lost their father to the machinations of an evil woman who stepped into their lives under the guise of love. That is not love. That is the definition of a monster. She had no soul, no remorse, and she would have continued her cycle of scams and destruction if we had not caught her. It took us time. It took us digging through the lies, through the double identities, and through the false confessions, but we got there. Justice has a way of finding its mark, even when the target tries to hide behind a curtain of lies. In the end, she got exactly what she deserved. But it does nothing to bring back a man like Bernie James, who simply wanted to be a father, a husband, and a protector. It is a sobering reminder that when you close your doors at night, you truly have no idea what monsters might be sitting at your own dinner table. People are strange creatures because they kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, and you have to be kidding me if you think you can hide the truth behind a mask for long. You think you know the person sleeping next to you, but the door closes at night and the truth stays inside where nobody can see it. Bernie James was a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a man who wanted to protect, not destroy, and he met a woman named Patty. She had a deep, jagged scar on her face, and he did not care because he saw a human being, but that scar was just a surface, and beneath it was a void. My. They say the eyes are the window to the soul, but in her case, it was a dark, hollow tunnel. On March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, this quiet bedroom community was ripped apart. Bernie was found in his car, blunt trauma, strangled, and there were stories, lies, and more lies. She said a stranger did it, a black man looking for matches, which is the oldest trick in the book, because you create a phantom, you blame the shadows, and you hope the police are not smart enough to see through the fog. But we see through the fog. I tell you, we always do. The scene was staged. An oil change? The dipstick was full. A robbery? The wallet was sitting right there, unmolested. It makes no sense, and that is how you catch a liar, because they cannot keep the details straight. We dig, we peel back the layers, and we find out she was not just Patty. She was Demi. She was TJ. She was a ghost she invented to manipulate a pathetic pawn named Tim Ott. She played him like a piano and used him to do the dirty work. She had him grind up seeds to poison her husband. She had him stalk him. And finally she had him kill him. You have to be kidding me. When we brought Tim Ott in, he was confused and did not even know the woman by her real name. And that is when you know the web is collapsing. We found the blood, we found the truth, and when we finally cornered her, she tried the old, I have a split personality routine. I do not remember, she said. The only thing she remembered was how to save her own skin. She was a monster, pure and simple. She took a man who loved her, a man who stepped in to raise her children, and she discarded him like trash. She did not kill because she was abused. She killed because she was greedy, because she was cold, and because she could not handle being left behind by a man who finally saw through her. You cannot run from the truth. It catches up to you. It always does, and that is a fact. People are strange creatures. They kill for reasons that would make a sane man weep, or perhaps just laugh at the absurdity of it all. You see it all in this line of work. You think you have seen the depths of human depravity, and then someone comes along and surprises you with a new, dark trick. This is a story of Bernie James, a man who served his country in Vietnam and his community as a firefighter. He was a man who wanted to be a good father, a man who looked for the good in people, even when that good was nowhere to be found. He found himself a woman named Patty. She came into his life with a deep scar on her face and a story of a woman who had been hurt, a woman who needed a place to belong. He did not see a monster. He saw a person in need. But you have to be kidding me if you think that was the truth. It was all a mask. On March 24th, 1987, in Wilton Manors, Florida, a place where people went to escape the noise, the silence was shattered. Bernie James was found dead in his vehicle. His life, a life that had already endured the tragedy of losing a wife to an aneurysm, was taken in a cold, calculating way. The scene was staged. The story was told that he was working on his car, that a stranger had appeared, that things had gone wrong. But the evidence told a different story. The wallet was rifled through but left on the ground, not a sign of a real robbery. The car showed no signs of the struggle that should have been there. It was all a lie. I tell you, when you start digging, you realize that people who lie like this are never just lying about one thing. They are living a double life. Patty James was not just a wife. She was a con artist. She was using her children as props to scam churches, pretending her son was deaf just to get a handout. She had created a fake person, a flight attendant named TJ, just to manipulate a man named Tim Ott. She played both sides, pulling the strings like a puppet master. She convinced Tim Ott, a man she had met in a bowling league, that Bernie was an abuser, that he was a monster, all to get Tim to do her dirty work. And Tim, he fell for it. He took the bait. He admitted to the crime, to the violence that happened in his own apartment, not in the car where the body was found. The motive was as old as time itself: greed. She had him take out a life insurance policy, and she made sure she was the only one who would benefit. She could not handle the idea that he was going to leave her, that her third marriage was going to fail. She was a woman who could not stand rejection, a woman who had no conscience. Even when confronted, she did not apologize. She did not express remorse. She simply claimed that the other person, the fake personality she had invented, was responsible for the murder. It is a pathetic defense for a life of pure evil. She was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Justice was served, but it does not bring back a man who deserved so much more. You look at a case like this, and you wonder, how does someone like that even breathe the same air as the rest of us? They do not care about you. They do not care about the truth. And they certainly do not care about the lives they destroy. It is a dark, cold world out there, and sometimes the monsters are the ones you let into your own home, thinking they're the ones who need your protection. You have to be careful who you trust, because some people, they do not have a heart. They only have an agenda. And that, I tell you, is the saddest part of it all. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine, and sometimes the face they show the world is nothing more than a mask, a theater production designed to hide the monster lurking behind it. I have seen it all in my time, but this one really tests the limits of what you think a person is capable of. It starts in Wilton Manors, Florida, on March 24th, 1987, at 9:22 in the evening. Bernie James, a 37-year-old man, a former Marine, a paramedic, and a father, ends up dead in his own vehicle. His family finds him. They are screaming. They are crying. They are performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. But it is too late. The scene is wrong. The wallet is tossed aside, right there in the open, just a few feet away. You have to be kidding me. That is not a robbery. That is a performance. Then we meet the wife, Patty. She tells us the story about a man, a stranger, a black man looking for matches. She claimed she saw him, that she went inside, and that when she came back out, her husband was gone. My, if you're going to tell a lie, make sure it holds water. The car, the passenger seat reclined, the oil cans. It was a setup. Bernie was supposed to be doing an oil change, but the dipstick was full. People lie, but physical evidence, it never lies. It is the one thing you can always rely on in this business. We start peeling back the layers. We talk to the parents. They tell us about the screaming matches, the isolation, the control. And then we bring her back in. She changes her tune. Now, it is not a stranger. It is a man named Tim Ott. She claims she was a victim of abuse, that she was locked in a bathroom while this man killed her husband. I tell you, you hear stories like this, and you just shake your head. We find Tim Ott, and this is where the truth hits you in the face like a bucket of cold water. He has never heard of Bernie James. He knows a woman named Demi, a woman he met over phone, and he knows a woman named Patty. He did not know they were the same person. She created a fantasy world, played these men against each other, all to get what she wanted. It was greed, plain and simple. She wanted the insurance money. She could not stand that her husband was leaving her. She manipulated this man, Tim, into doing her dirty work. She treated people like tools, like disposable items. In the end, she gets life in prison where she belongs. There is no such thing as a perfect crime because there is no such thing as a perfect criminal. They always make a mistake. And when they do, I am waiting to pick up the pieces. People are strange creatures. They kill for the most absurd reasons you could imagine, and they lie about it like it is as natural as breathing. I tell you, you see the worst of humanity in this job, and sometimes you see a monster wearing a mask of domestic normalcy. This case in Wilton Manor, Florida, was something else. It started on March 24, 1987, a quiet town. The kind of place where nothing happens until it does. Bernie James, a 37-year-old firefighter and former Marine, was found dead in his vehicle. Blunt force trauma to the head, ligature marks around the neck, asphyxiation. The first thing you look for is a logic in the story, and the story his wife, Patty, told was a work of fiction. She claimed she saw him talking to a stranger, a black man looking for matches. You have to be kidding me. A man is beaten, choked to death, and his wallet is lying on the driveway, rifled through, while the car is filled with tools for an oil change that was never needed. It does not add up. The blood evidence was missing from the car. It did not happen there. It happened in the darkness of someone else's home. As we dug deeper, we found that Patty was not just a wife. She was a puppeteer. She was using a man named Timot, playing him like a fiddle. She adopted fake personas, Demi and TJ, flight attendants, imaginary friends, all to isolate herself and to convince this man that her husband was a monster. It was a masterclass in deception. They even discussed ways to kill him, like poisoning him with Valium, before settling on the brutal reality of a baseball bat and a wire. When you peel back the layers of life like that, you find a void. She did not want a husband. She wanted possession, and she wanted the life insurance payout that came with his end. You have to understand, when a woman creates an entire alternate reality to justify the murder of her own husband, you are not looking at a crime of passion. You are looking at cold, calculated malice. She tried to claim she remembered nothing, that it was this imaginary TJ who did it. The nerve of some people. We found the blood in the apartment of Timot, proving exactly where the life was taken. He took a plea, but she went to trial, and when the dust settled, she got exactly what she deserved, a life sentence. People like that, they do not have a conscience. They do not feel remorse. They walk among us, hiding behind scars and fake stories, waiting for the moment they can strike. It is a tragedy for those children to be raised by someone who would sacrifice their father for money and control. That is not a mother. That is a predator. And in the end, the truth always has a way of coming out into the light, no matter how hard they try to bury it in the dark. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. Sometimes it is for money, sometimes for jealousy, and sometimes just because they are bored with the person they are with. It is a sad commentary on the human condition. I tell you, you look at a case like the murder of Bernie James, and you realize that some people walk among us wearing masks, hiding monsters beneath the surface. Bernie James was a good man. He was born on July 1st, 1949, in Washington District of Columbia. A man who loved the outdoors, a veteran who served 2 tours in Vietnam, a firefighter, a paramedic. He was a protector. He lost his first wife, Lisa, to an aneurysm in 1980, and he was left to raise 3 children on his own. He was a man with a heart, a man who wanted a family again, and then he met Patty. She came into his life, and he saw past her physical scars. He saw the person inside, or so he thought. You have to be kidding me if you believe that she was the loving, devoted wife she pretended to be. They married in 1982, and they moved the family to Wilton Manors, Florida. But by March 24th, 1987, that life was about to be shattered. At 9:22 post-meridium, a call comes into 911. Bernie James was found dead in his vehicle. The scene, it was all wrong. The passenger seat was reclined. He was unresponsive. and there was blood on the right side of the head and ligature marks around the neck. Asphyxiation. Someone had strangled him. Patty told us a story. She said she was inside the house, and he was outside working on the car, and then she saw him talking to a black man who was looking for matches for a cigar. My, what a convenient story. 20 minutes later, she finds him dead. I tell you, in my experience, when someone provides that level of detail, they are usually lying. We checked the car. The oil was full. He was not doing an oil change. The wallet was on the ground, rifled through, but the cards were still there. That is not a robbery. That is a staged event. We looked into the family dynamic, and what we found was a nightmare. Patty was a master of deception. She had isolated those children, scamming churches by pretending her son was deaf, manipulating everyone around her. And the kicker? She was not just pretending to be herself. She was pretending to be a flight attendant named TJ. And then she created a persona named Demi to meet an accomplice named Timot. She played them both. She played everybody. She manipulated Tim Ott into killing her husband because she could not handle the rejection of A. Divorce. She and Tim discussed different ways to kill Bernie, from poison to shooting, before settling on the apartment as a kill site. When we finally broke Tim Ott, he told us the truth. He told us about the baseball bat, the wire, the struggle. And Patty, when confronted, she just played the victim again, claiming she did not remember anything, claiming she was just another victim of TJ. You have to be kidding me. She was cold. She was calculating, and she was evil. A jury saw through the lies, and she was sentenced to life in prison. It is a tragedy. A man who gave so much to help others, taken by the person who promised to love him. That is the truth of it. No matter how quiet the neighborhood, no matter how normal things appear on the outside, you never really know what happens when a person closes a door at night. And that, I tell you, is the scariest thought of all. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. My, you have to be kidding me. You think you know someone. You go to bed at night, you close the door, and you think you are safe. But the monster is not under the bed. The monster is in the bed. Bernie James was a good man, a Marine, a firefighter, a father. He lost his first wife to an aneurysm and was left to raise 3 children on his own. He was a man who wanted love, and in 1982, he thought he found it. Her name was Patty. She had a scar that defined her, made her feel less than human, but Bernie, he did not see that. He saw a person. But beneath that exterior, there was a void, a darkness. 1987. Wilton Manors. A quiet place. A place where nothing happens. Until it did. March 24th. 9:22 in the evening. A call comes in. Bernie is dead. Blunt trauma to the head. Ligature marks. And the scene. It was a staged disaster. The wallet rifled through, left there in plain sight. An oil change that was not needed. The car not big enough for the act that occurred. It did not take long to see through the smoke and mirrors. Patty tells a story about a man who wanted matches for a cigar. A ghost. A figment of a desperate imagination. We do not buy fairy tales. We look at facts. The inconsistent